building repair orders and estimates using Smart eCat and Smart Jobs. So as we begin, you're looking at just my main RO Writer screen. One thing to note, I am using version 1.31.39 of the RO Writer software. That is, as of today, the current release version of that software. So certainly anything that we do and or discuss during this morning's webinar is certainly feasible with the current software variations that are out there on the street today. So as we begin, again, the topic at hand is building repair orders and estimates using Smart eCat and Smart Jobs. As I'm looking at my screen here, I'm going to pick on some of the existing estimates and or work in progress tickets that I have available as we go through and discuss today's topic. We're going to start out by just looking at the different entry points that we get into the catalog, discuss the difference one versus the other, and then also the different ways that we can use Smart eCat and or Smart Jobs to add jobs onto a transaction. I'm going to start out with my ticket for Jennifer Quinn down here at the bottom. She's got her 2011 Chevy Malibu, and as I bring that ticket up to the screen, there's an icon here in the upper left-hand corner that says Smart eJobs. There's an icon in the far upper left-hand corner that says Smart eCat. We often get the question of, well, which way is the right way to enter the catalog? Which way should we begin? And I'll typically tell people that if you're inside of an estimate, we can use the Smart eJobs icon. The Smart eCat icon exists if we'd like to do an ad hoc search without having an open estimate and or a work in progress ticket. Both have the exact same functionality. They have just a different landing place as we get out to the catalog. Meaning if I was to open Jennifer Quinn again, and if I clicked on the Smart eJobs icon inside of my estimate window, launches me out to the Smart eCat catalog, and it specifically takes me to the tab for Smart eJobs. So if I'd like to add a Smart Job, we'll come back and do that here in just a moment. That's the easiest way to get to that tab to go ahead and add a Smart Job onto a ticket. If I wanted to just access the catalog, I could hit that Smart eCat icon. The only difference is when we click on Smart eCat, it launches it out into the Smart eCat catalog, and we end up on the Catalog tab, where we then see our list of categories and subcategories, parts, and labor that are available through the Epicor catalog and our Smart eCat integration. If I wanted to, from here, go and apply and or use a Smart Job, I certainly can just switch my tab. Same with if I wanted to go ahead and look at my category search. If I entered the catalog using Smart eJobs, I could simply click on the categories icon here, and now we see it flips me over to my catalog tab, and we end up in the exact same place. So the answer to the question of, well, which way should I use to access the catalog is there really isn't a right or a wrong way. They both take you to the exact same piece, have the exact same functionality available. It's just a slightly different landing place as we get out to the catalog, either the Smart eJob tab and or the catalog tab with that categories view already pulled up. In our case, I'm going to go back to Jennifer Quinn. We'll start from scratch again. And in our case, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to add an oil change onto this estimate for Jennifer Quinn. I'll click on Smart eJobs in the upper left-hand corner. And again, we're going to look at three different ways that we can search the catalog or use Smart eCat and Smart Jobs to add jobs onto a transaction. We're going to start out looking at Smart Jobs, and so we'll talk about how we use those to add jobs onto a ticket. We're going to use the search functionality up here at the top of this screen. We'll also use the category search as we go along as well. So three different ways that we can use this catalog. We start out with Smart Jobs. Now down here at the bottom, I've got my list of Smart Jobs categories, and these are user definable, meaning as I drop this window down, I have a fairly extensive list of categories that I've built over the course of time. Specifically for the first example, I'd like to take a look at an oil change for our friend Jennifer Quinn. So as I look down through my list, the very first oil change category that I have is just my standard oil changes. So if I was to go down to my oil change dash standard line, when I pick that list, the box beneath it where it says Smart Jobs now becomes available. So if I was to go ahead and drop that list down again, user definable, and we can predefine a list of jobs that are available inside of Smart Jobs. In my case, I do have an oil change special that I'll run occasionally at $24.99. My base oil changes at either $5.20, $5.30, or $10.30 at a package price of $32.99. Now, as it relates to Jennifer Quinn and her 2011 Chevy Malibu, I'd first like to go check and see what viscosity of oil we're going to put into this vehicle. I'd select my job that I've got that says oil viscosity. And anytime we do a Smart Job is just a predetermined set of items, parts, labor, local parts, local labor that it's going to add onto the transaction. In this case, my oil viscosity smart job only has one task to perform. That is, we're going to go look up in our catalog parts section the oil viscosity. In the Epicor catalog, specifications are listed along with the parts. So if I'm looking for, in this case, the viscosity, I'd simply click on Go at the bottom of this window. Once I click on Go, it's going to take me in and it's going to show me the viscosity, which for this 2011 Chevy Malibu, we either have a recommended viscosity of 5W30 and or if the vehicle is going to be driven below negative 20 Fahrenheit, O30 also an applicable weight of oil. Came into this tab just primarily for reference purposes. I like to see exactly what the viscosity of oil should be. What you'll notice is up here at the top, we've moved from our Smart eJob tab into our Catalog tab. If I wanted to go back and now select a different job, I now know it's 5W30, which we're going to put into this vehicle. I simply click back on that Smart eJob tab, and I could then drop my window down again and change from the oil viscosity down to my 5W30 full-service oil change. Once I've selected that, a couple of different options or additional pieces come into play, starting with, well, from my local inventory, it's going to add 5W30 oil. I have pre-configured this job to know that that is the oil that it should bring along with, making sure we're not only costing it, charging it, and adjusting our inventory as we go to actually sell the oil change. So we have our 530 full service oil change, 530 oil is the part number, and in terms of the parts it's going to look for, it's going to check to make sure that this shouldn't be a synthetic oil change. It's also going to let me verify the viscosity. I'll look up the engine oil capacity, and then last but not least, we'll find the oil filter that fits this specific vehicle. At the bottom of this window, again, there's an option there that says Go. Once I click on Go, it's going to start walking me through the individual components, meaning, if you look at it, it says there was synthetic blend, original equipment. So we're looking to meet the GM Dexos 1 specification as far as the oil is concerned. So when we talk about the engine oil type tells me that that is the way. So either a semi or a full synthetic, likely the right oil to be selected for this vehicle. If I wanted to include that, if I want to bring that specification forward, I would simply check the box and hit Next in the upper right-hand corner. If I was going to want to adjust the job that we're going to perform, I could certainly come back to the Smart eJob tab, select a different weight of oil, and or select a different category, be it, again, high mileage, full synthetic, as we go through. Click on Next, and again, it's telling me 530 is my recommended viscosity. I know that I'm doing the 530 oil change, so I'm not worried about changing and or selecting that. So again, Next in the upper right-hand corner. Looking at my capacity, it's 5 quarts, which includes the filter capacity. If I put a check mark in that box, it'll bring that specification forward and list that on the transaction as it comes through. I'll hit Next in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and click on Next, and it's going to carry me through, and now I can see the oil filter that we're looking for. In this case, it's checking both my local inventory as well as what's available through my local suppliers. In my case, I carry Napa's line of Pro Select filters on my shelf. So you'll notice the oil filter, the 27082 MP, shows that I have 16 of those in stock. So I'll go ahead and I'll put a check mark on the left-hand side and go ahead and click on Next. Takes you to what's called our Posted Parts and Labor tab. As we go through that Posted Parts and Labor tab, it's telling me that from my local inventory, we're going to get 5 quarts of 5W30 oil, as well as that 27082 MP oil filter. If I was to look across the top, there are 3 separate tabs: our Parts tab, our Labor tab, and our Notes tab. Now, in this case, I don't have this job looking of book time labor to replace an oil change. So if I go ahead and just click on the Labor tab, it will tell me that I don't have and or haven't selected any specific labor from the catalog. I do have a base labor charge at 0.2 of an hour times my $85 an hour labor rate for a $17 labor charge associated with this particular oil change. The Notes tab will show me any specifications that we grabbed. In this case, synthetic blend and or the engine oil capacity would be the 2 items that we grabbed as we went through our search for the Smart Shop. Out here to the right, we're going to post the parts and labor to a new job whenever we use a smart job that is pre-selected by default. I have, as I've configured the smart job, defined which job it will use, and as we drop this back on the ticket, we will use post and exit to leave our catalog, and once we do, it comes back over to my transaction for Jennifer Quinn. It's our 5W30 full-service oil change, which includes 5 quarts of 5W30 oil, an oil filter, and then $32.99 as the package price. So we've used a smart job in order to add that oil change onto the ticket. A couple of other examples of what we can do with smart jobs before we move on to some of our search windows. I'm going to hit Smart eJobs in the upper left-hand corner. As I bring up my Smart eJobs window, again, this time we'll just add on something as simple as a tire rotation. So if I scroll down a bit through my list of categories, I'm going to go to my tire service category, and underneath my list of jobs, I'm just going to grab my tire rotation, which is pre-canned with a package price of $19.99 inside of my configuration. So I select my tire rotation, and as I do, the only thing that this has to do is to look up the lug nut torque specifications. If I clicked on Go, it'll tell me based upon the vehicle that we're working from, it's 100 foot-pounds. As we find our lug nut torque, I'll put a check mark in the box on the left-hand side to bring that specification forward, and I'll hit Next in the upper right-hand corner. We again get to our Post Parts and Labor tab. We didn't select any parts as we went through. We didn't pick any labor. Only that Notes tab would have information on it, simply because that was the only line that we selected as we went through picking parts from our catalog. I want to drop this back onto my ticket. Again, it's already predetermined exactly what job we're going to assign this to. If I wanted to assign my technician, I could pick from my technician drop-down. It would save me from having to do that as we get back over to our transaction. And down at the bottom, there's exit, there's post and exit. The difference between the three is if I click exit, it's going to leave my Smart eCat catalog, go back over to my transaction, and it won't bring my tire rotation over. So we came out here for reference purposes. We wanted to look up a time, find a part, whatever it was. We don't want to drop it back onto the ticket. If I click on Post, Post will drop the tire rotation back onto the ticket and leave me in the catalog. So if I had other searches I wanted to go through, then Post says, drop this job on the ticket, and now let's start fresh with whatever the next job might be. And or Post and exit, as we have seen before, will allow us to take that job back over to our transaction, drop it onto the ticket, and leave the catalog. So now we can then navigate just on the ROIder side. I'm going to open up this tire rotation labor operation because what you'll see is the specifications get appended to the labor description. So while they are listed in the catalog as parts, as we see them back over on the ROIder side, it's now adjusted and or appended those to my labor description. Notice it grabbed my technician here versus the first one that we did where we didn't assign a technician. That's what is waiting for us to fill in before we're done with that oil change. There is my specifications that we grabbed there is the 5 quarts of oil and then also the Dexos 1 as our specification. Kind of cancel the close back out of there. So we've got our oil change, we've got our tire rotation that we've added on the ticket. One last smart job example that I'd like to go through. I'm going to go back up to Smart eJobs here in the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to, underneath our category of brakes, and in this case, we're going to add on an estimate to do both the front brake pads and rotors for this vehicle. I'll select brake front disc as my category, and when I drop my window down, install front brake pads and rotors is going to be the job I select from my pre-existing or my predefined list of smart jobs. Now my front brake pads and rotors, and this one's different than any of the ones we've done to this point in that it's going to also look up the book time labor to replace the brake rotor. We've got the brake rotor labor. We also are going to look up the pads, the brake rotor, the wheel seal, and the hardware kit. Before we actually go through the steps of this job, a note about the boxes over here on the left-hand side. As we come into any smart job, it will show us the list of items that we are going to consider as we proceed through this job. If you'll notice down at the bottom, there is a legend that tells you what the different icons that could appear on that left-hand side are indicating. In this case, all 5 of the items on my smart job have not yet been viewed. So in this case, they're all open, empty boxes, which indicates, again, not viewed. If I said, well, I don't need a wheel seal and or I don't need a hardware kit, if I just left-clicked on either one of those, it then now turns that box from just the empty box to a red X, which tells the system, this time, skip those 2 elements. They're supposed to be considered as part of a smart job to do the pads and rotors. However, I don't need them for this particular estimate. So I have disabled and or turned them off, at least for this time. And now when I click on go, only 3 elements to consider: the brake rotor, the pads, and then also the labor for the brake rotors, the pads, and then also the brake rotors as well. I click on go at the bottom of this window. It takes me first into the labor window. The smart job will go through the different elements in the sequence that we've defined. In my case, starting with the labor, and if we're going to remove or replace the rotors, and that's front both, it's 1 hour, which does, if I look at the notes, include repacking the wheel bearings if applicable, and replacing the brake pads if necessary. Were we to refinish the rotors, does not include that in this time. If I wanted 1 hour as my labor time, I simply put a check mark in the box on the left-hand side and click on Next. Takes me through, in the next element of that smart job that we were looking for was to find the brake pad. And again, in this case, I don't have the brake pads on my shelf, so it's not showing me any in my local inventory. However, it did query my vendors, Napa as my primary, Advanced, O'Reilly, and then last but not least, still waiting on a response back from CarQuest as far as pricing and availability. If Napa has them available and then the safety stock just happens to be my preferred line, I can check the box, put the X, or put a check mark in that gray box on the left-hand side. In the upper right-hand corner, I'll go ahead and click on Next. Click on Next, and now it says we're going to look for the brake rotors. So again, looking through my local vendors coming from my local store, the Ultra Premium line available from Napa might cost $83.78, suggested list $140.28, and then selling price to the consumer $180.99. Again, I've used smart pricing to tell it, here's how you decide where this number should be based upon either the cost and or the suggested list I'm getting back from my vendor. They have 2 of them available, which is exactly the number I would need to do the front rotors on this 2011 Chevy Malibu. I'll put a check mark in the box on the left-hand side. If I wanted to compare or see what my other vendors might have available, what you'll notice is I have Napa, and there's a small box to the left-hand side of Napa that has a minus key. Napa is currently expanded. If I wanted to minimize Napa, I would just hit that minus key. And or if I was going to see what Advanced has available, where we're ready to drop this job back onto the ticket. One last piece before we do, if I went back and looked at that Smart eJob tab, what we'll see is now each of the 3 elements that we have gone through to consider have the check mark in the box because, again, according to our legend, items have been posted, meaning we were at that window, we have selected something from that window as we went through. If I had a need to go back and revisit any of the windows, I would simply click on the box, which then unchecks that. And if I were to click on go, which you'll notice it'll skip the brake rotor, it'll skip the brake pad and go, the labor for the brake rotor, skip the brake pads, and then also go directly to the catalog part search for those brake rotors. Click on go, and again, that's where we end up, is on the brake rotor front window, where even though I'm back at this window, I don't have to pick something from the available list. I'll just hit next in the upper right-hand corner. Next will always take me to whatever is the next not viewed element of a smart job, and or once we have viewed all of the windows, take me to my posted parts and labor tab. So we get to our posted parts and labor tab, and my options are the same. I can assign my technician. If I saw fit, I can go ahead and use post and exit to leave the catalog and come and go back over to my transaction for Jennifer Quinn. In this case, pads are something that I would typically keep on my shelf. So what it's asking me is, while you would potentially stock this item, I don't have it in stock right now, so it's going to want to flip it to a non-stock item, which will then want me to go ahead and post an outside purchase. In this case, do you want to switch to non-stock is the question. I'll answer yes to that question. Now when I get back over to my ticket, it's already flagged my brake pads as a non-stock item and will expect me to post my accounts payable transaction for those before I go ahead and finalize this transaction. We're going to leave Jennifer Quinn alone for the time being, as well as get away from just using smart jobs here for a bit. I've got another estimate here for Kathy Parker in her 2007 Honda Accord. Smart jobs are great for those items that you do with any degree of frequency, meaning they ensure a consistency of execution. They also ensure that any other elements, be it oil, be it brake fluid, be it coolant, get brought along with the job, so we're not reliant on someone behind the counter, remembering to add those additional pieces so we can build a list of different items. However, I've got about 300 smart jobs in my system. There are thousands of different parts that you'll replace over the course of time on different vehicles. So as opposed to using a smart job for every transaction, certainly as we get through different jobs for cars, we'll want to find other parts that are available in the catalog. In this case, I need a battery for Kathy Parker. So I want to add a battery onto the ticket. So I hit the Smart eJob tab. What I actually want to do is I want to go over to my category search. So I'm going to click on categories. And as I click on categories, you'll notice, again, there's my list on the left-hand side. Specifically, we're looking for battery replacement. So I will highlight battery replacement on my left-hand side. And over to the right where it says we've got parts, the only subcategory here is batteries and cables. And the only labor subcategory is battery, cable, and wiring. We'll start with the part first. So if I was to double-click on that part, batteries and cables, it takes me in, and it's now going to go search. And now it's going to search for the category as opposed to just a very specific element like we did with Smart Jobs. Smart Job will find you the brake pads. It will find you the brake rotors. It won't find you both without doing two different searches. In this case, we've got the battery available from Napa. We also have a negative battery cable where I can need that. So it's found more than just the singular element. Again, coming from the distribution center for Napa, if I'm looking for something local that I might be able to get done a little quicker, I'll look at Advance as my second call. Now I can see that I've got an 84-month battery from Advance, and again, both coming from my local Advance store. I wanted to see if O'Reilly and or CarQuest had options available to me that might either be more cost-effective, but still at the local store. We can see that we've got the cheapest one here, $90.01, coming from O'Reilly. I simply click the box to go ahead and grab that from O'Reilly. And what you'll notice as we do a category search, it says we're in this category, battery replacement. The part subcategory is batteries and cables. And the labor subcategory, if I wanted to, I'd simply go ahead and select battery, cable, and wiring. And once I do that, it switches from the part window to the labor window. To remove and replace the battery is 0.7 of an hour if it's just the regular, and or if it's the hybrid battery, then we're looking at 1.4. Put a check mark in the box there, and when I want to get to my posted parts and labor tab, I hit next in the upper right-hand corner. When I click on next, you'll notice there's the battery, and if I looked at the labor tab, there is the 0.7 of an hour multiplied times my $85 an hour labor rate to come up at $59.50 as my price for that piece. If I'd like to drop that job back onto the ticket, on the right-hand side, I can now define the job that we want to add. This isn't predefined like a smart job is. We're going to add a new job onto the ticket. The job is going to be in the category of starting and charging, and by default, the job that it's going to add will just say electrical labor. Before I hit post or post and exit to drop that job back on the ticket, I'm also going to look at my labor options down here in the lower right-hand corner. Three options here. Use predefined description says, well, this is the job that I've determined it gets associated with starting and charging. So if I was to leave it set to use predefined description, the description that comes across would just say electrical labor. If I told it to append to the predefined description, then it would say electrical labor, remove and replace battery, because it's going to take this labor description and append that one to it. Or in this case, I want it to just say remove and replace battery. So I'm going to have it replace the predefined description. Not use this, but use this as my description of exactly what this job is intended to cover. I'll hit post and exit just so we can see that come across. And what we see now is remove and replace battery. The underscore is replaced by the ampersand as we're looking at it. But on our window here, remove and replace battery, there's my 7/10 of an hour that we grabbed as we went through the catalog. And if I was to go back and look, there's the battery that was brought as well. In this case, we used a category search as opposed to using a smart job to look up both the parts and the labor to add that job back on the ticket. As I started out my conversation today, I told you that both of these in the upper left-hand corner essentially had the same functionality embedded within. So we're going to do another job using a category search. This time I'll hit Smart eCat in the upper left-hand corner. And what that does is it saves me the step of having to flip from my Smart eJob tab to my catalog window. I can come down here to, let's say, water pump replacement. If I pick water pump replacement as my category, I now have 4 subcategories for parts as well as 1 subcategory for labor. If I'd like to go through and select different items, let's start out with just the water pump. So I'll double click on the water pump. We're going to also eventually need the upper and lower radiator hoses as well as a thermostat as we go through. So as it starts out the search, again, not looking for just the singular item of a water pump, but in this case from Napa we can either get the coolant and or the water pump. They've got one available at the local parts store, so maybe we'll go ahead and we'll select that water pump. I'm going to also, in addition to the water pump, get myself some hoses. So if I was to come up here to my drop down and then go to hoses, as I switch from one to the next, it redoes the queries and it says I've got a different subset of parts we're looking for. Let's go ahead and let's see what is now available from our vendors. In this case, don't have any radiator hoses available from Napa, so if I was to go ahead and minimize Napa or expand advanced, I can see they have both a lower and an upper radiator hose. So if I wanted both of those coming from my local advanced, I would just simply select both of them. Last element that we're looking to add on is going to be a thermostat. So if I go ahead and, again, change my parts drop down from my thermostat, from my hoses to my thermostat, again, it redoes the query and it finds out that I do have a thermostat available from Napa coming from the local DC. Still waiting for Advanced to respond, but I do see that O'Reilly has responded back to me when they've got a thermostat available at the local parts store. Grab the one from O'Reilly in this case, and then now if I wanted to go get the labor, I'll drop my window down here where it says labor, and I'll select the singular subcategory of cooling. And now again, as opposed to just seeing the water pump labor, as I'm looking through my list, I have a time to remove and replace the radiator hose. We're going to do both, so let's check that one there. We're going to remove and replace the thermostat and or the outlet, so I'll again check that box there. Then if I scroll down just a little bit, I can also see that in order to remove and replace the water pump, 2.3 hours is my labor time. So I'll check each of those 3 elements and then now click Next. Again, I'm done picking items from my category search, so I click on Next and it takes me into my Posted Parts and Labor tab where I've got the water pump from Napa, the upper and lower radiator hose coming from Advanced, and also from O'Reilly, our thermostat. If I look at the labor tab, I've actually got 3 different labor jobs that we've brought across. The sum total is 3.9 hours. And as we're going to go ahead and bring that back over, again, my options are to post it to a new job. And if I did post it to a new job, it would sum total the entire amount to that 3.9 hours at a singular labor job over on my transaction. My other options would be to post it to an existing job. Well, the only existing job I've got is to remove and replace the battery, not an applicable choice in this case. And or let's add the individual parts and labor to the invoice. When I add the individual parts and labor to the invoice, we're going to use the predefined descriptions that we've got. I'm sorry, we're going to replace the predefined descriptions with the one we have here. And what we'll see as I hit post and exit is I actually get 7 different lines brought over to my transaction, 3 labor and 4 parts. And in this case, to now build the jobs themselves, all I'm going to do is drag and drop, meaning the water pump goes with the remove and replace water pump job, and now I have a job total for that particular piece. We'll grab the thermostat, and we'll drop it on the thermostat job. And last but not least, we'll move the radiator hoses. In my case, because there's just 2, we'll just pick them up and move them individually. You could have also used control and double-clicked and or multi-clicked to have more than one move at any given point in time. So as I drop this 5 back onto the ticket, I've added the individual lines onto the transaction. And as I see, I've now got 3 different jobs built from that particular piece. So we can do that one way or the other, again, as one single job with multiple categories, multiple labor times, or separate jobs, again, using not just multiple labor times, but also using multiple parts as well. A couple of last pieces that we want to look at as far as adding jobs through Smart eCat is concerned. I'll click Smart eJobs in the upper left-hand corner because maybe we needed the mounting gasket for the water pump in addition to the element that we've already found. I want to find a very specific part, and I don't have a Smart job for it or don't want to bother with the categories. The search functionality is also a very effective way to find that particular piece. In this case, I'll put in my keyword search or term of water pump and then click on Find. As I click on Find, it gives me every part and labor description that contains the words water pump. If I was to look there, I've got my water pump gasket. If you'll notice, there's also the mounting gasket, and you see it with the word gaskets in parentheses and or water pump in parentheses. What you'll find with descriptions through the search functionality is there is a lot of redundancy in the Epicor catalog. What I mean by that is, if I click down the water pump mounting gasket underneath the gaskets category, it takes me and it does the search, and it's going to find what vendors have parts available. In this case, nothing available from Napa, but there is that Felpro 35738 coming from Advance. If I was to go back and do the exact same search, but this time I'll pick water pump mounting gasket and then water pump in parentheses, what you'll find is, again, Napa doesn't have a part available. But as I wait for my vendors to come in, once Advance comes and shows us what they have available, we'll see that it's the exact same part coming from Felpro. So again, get Advance to respond back, we'll see that it didn't matter which way we did the search, whether we did it with the one that had the gasket in parentheses or water pump in parentheses. We're going to add this one onto our transaction. I'll simply put the check mark on the left-hand side, click on Next, and then in this case, I'd like to post that to an existing job. So all I have to do is drop that window down where it says Select, go ahead and grab the Remove and Replace Water Pump job, and then hit Post and Exit, and it'll tie that gasket right to that water pump job as we're back over on our transaction. So as we have to go out and find additional parts, we can just add them back to a job that already exists back over on my estimate window. One last piece as far as we're looking at that search functionality, and we're going to go back in, and this time instead of picking on Kathy and or Jennifer, we go up, I've got Lisa Bullard with her 06 Ford Explorer. We can do this, we can use the search functionality to build a job from scratch as well. So for example, we're going to replace the window motor on this particular vehicle. So I simply go in and I put my keyword in, and I just double click on the left-hand side to find the part first. In this case, once I've found the search window, it's going to, again, query my vendors for pricing and availability. I'll see who has one available. We'll grab the one from Advance as my secondary supplier. They have the passenger side and or the driver's side. If we'll do the passenger side window motor, we will select that. Now from here, I have to either hit Post and or Next in order to add that part into my shopping cart, one or the other. The only time that the Post and or Next buttons, in this case, the Post and Next buttons become very important as we're using the search functionality. If I simply went back up and I clicked on Find and moved over to the labor, it would not bring my window motor into my posted parts and labor window. So I'll click on Post on the right-hand side, and then Find now at the top, and then double-click on the labor description of window motor, where it says 1.1 hours is the time to do either one on the front. I'll select that, and then now since that's the last item we're going to search for, I'll click on Next, and now there's my window motor as well as there's the labor, the 1.1 hours. We'll create a new job. In this case, we're going to replace the predefined description, and when I hit Post and Exit, over it comes. We're going to replace the window motor front. There's my part total, my labor total, and then my job total. So information, kind of 3 different ways that we can use Smart eCat and or Smart Jobs to add items onto a ticket. Whether we've got a pre-established list of Smart Jobs in the system, whether we're using the category search to go through the epic order categories and then subcategories for both parts and labor, and or if we're going to use the search functionality to just use a keyword. And again, as we get back, we have multiple different options as to whether we're adding to existing jobs, adding new jobs, and or in the case of a smart job, using a pre-existing.